So I've been talking about this book, The Origins of Judaism. So Israeli archaeologist Yonatan Adler argues and shows with a lot of evidence that people weren't really thinking biblically and following the religion of Moses until around probably, well, there isn't evidence that people were doing it until around the year 150 BC to as far back as maybe 200 BC. So we're talking about 150 years to 200 years before the birth of Jesus. And so um, that makes a lot of sense. He also demonstrates that that's when we see, for the first time in the archaeological record, evidence of synagogues all around that area. So, in other words, people would go to these places and learn the stories, learn the worship and the Bible. And then that's how Jewish identity essentially was created and born. So to me, that makes a lot of sense because if you think about maybe going back maybe 100 years before that, so around from 300 to 200 BC, that's a time when Jerusalem and the whole area was ruled from Alexandria by the Ptolemies, who were Macedonian rulers connected to Alexander the Great, and they tried to synthesize Greek culture with Eastern culture and Babylonian, Egyptian, all kinds of different cultural traditions. So it makes sense to me that the biblical writers would have been working in that period, and they practiced something that was very common in the ancient world, which is archaism. So if you want to tell a really convincing, powerful story, if you want to get across a message, you set it in the distant past, right? You don't set it like last year or last week. So that would explain why people writing in those years who might have been very resentful towards Egypt or something would want to write a story like Exodus. And so I'm just conjecturing on the basis of his research, but I think it makes a lot of sense. There's also the fact that there are many arguments recently that the Bible shows a lot of influence from Greek writers, so Herodotus, Plato, and even Homer to some extent, and um, different different Greek mythologies show some influence on the writing of the Bible. Now that is an idea that was long resisted, but it's become much more acceptable nowadays. So if you're interested in all this kind of historical revisionism about the Bible, I strongly recommend Jonathan Adler's book.